Good morning, everyone. Just to make it clear what this meeting is, this is a meeting of the Governance Committee of the New York City Water Board. It's one of the board's topical subcommittees. We are having a meeting of the full board in 1 hour at 11:30. This is the Governance Committee meeting. Most of the people listening are probably repeat callers, so I'll be brief. Just we have a couple of things we'd like to say on the record. We've been doing these meetings under state authority to hold virtual conference call meetings in light of the ongoing public health issues of the pandemic. This meeting continues to be in that format. I would ask everyone to please place their phone on mute in order to limit the background noise. I would remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. The audio and the transcript will be available on the board's website at nyc.gov/nycwaterboard shortly after the meeting. I would also remind everyone politely that this is a business meeting of the board. It's not a forum for public input. Everyone is obviously welcome to join and listen. But the speaking roles for this meeting are limited to the board members and the board officers as requested by the members. If you have any comments or have anything you wish to inquire about that you hear here or any water board topic, what you should do is email us at nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov, or you can call us at 718-595-3594. But those are the forums to get your question answered, not this meeting today. The board meeting agenda and any documents we're going to refer to are all available on the board's website, nyc.gov/nycwaterboard. There's also a text captioning option if you have someone with you who is hearing impaired. It's a long URL, but you find it on the agenda document on the board's website. It's the streamtext.net URL. Copy it and paste that into your browser, and you should be able to follow along. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand it to Al Rodriguez now to open the meeting with the roll call. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Omar. Calling the roll. Chairman Golden.
Subcommittee Chairman Golden. Yes, I'm here. Thanks.
Okay. Member Fernandez Ketchum.
Good morning, everyone. Here.
Member Shaw.
Here.
Mr. Golden, we have a quorum for this committee meeting.
Thank you very much.
Would you,
I think we may have other board members in attendance, yes, including the real chair.
Al, would you poll the participants to see what other board members may be present?
Sure. Chairman Carney?
I'm here.
Okay. Member Freed? Member Sue? Member Zarilli?
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, Al. Very much appreciated. Do we have? Are you able to tell Omar whether we have any, or anyone else for that matter, if we have members of the public with us today?
I don't have it in front of me. I noticed from the rings we have probably about between 5 and 10 other folks on, some city employees and some members of the public.
Okay, great. Well, I will assume that we do have interested citizens, because I certainly hope that we do. And I want to welcome everybody to this governance committee meeting. As you know, this is not a meeting of the full water board. I mentioned during the role that when I was referred to as chairman, that I'm merely subcommittee chairman, because Al Carney, who is our esteemed chairman of the water board, who's on, will be leading a meeting of the full board, as was mentioned earlier, at 11:30. And of course, you're all welcome to join that as well. We have some important items that we're going to cover today, including relating to the responsibilities of the board and of this committee, and one of the key named roles that helps the board discharge its duties, specifically with respect to the exercise of governance obligations. And we are also going to be talking about the self-evaluation process that is required under applicable law for state authorities and boards, which we have results from. And so we're going to be covering what those results look like. They are anonymized, but they're available in the materials. So you can see what, in the aggregate, the perspectives were of the members who answered the questionnaire. And I just want to thank Joe Murin and Omar Nazem and Al Rodriguez and all of the fantastic professionals who keep us running and keep us effective and do a great job putting together the materials and covering all the logistics and making sure everything runs on time. Just a word about the role of the governance committee. It's meant to do what's implied by the name, to make sure that we have appropriate corporate governance practices and to make sure they're being implemented, to strive for best practices. And the formal composition is 3 members of the board. Other members of the board, of course, are welcome to join and to participate. And we have the ability to and the obligation to consider the governing documents like the bylaws and charters and code of ethics, and also other general good governance issues, especially relating to various policies that the board undertakes and to devise or amend or implement. And we can recommend that those policies be implemented or amended to the board for its consideration. And so it's, this is, given that this is a public board whose, that is, the water board is a public board whose activity has a personal effect on every person who is within the jurisdiction of the system, whether as a resident or as an employee. It is very important that we operate with appropriate transparency and good governance principles as a basic matter. And so with that, let me see if there are other comments relating to our function and our purpose that any of the aforementioned staff members want to make, or others who may be on the line, or other members of the subcommittee, or the real chair, as I refer to him, whom we also have the pleasure of having with us.
John, thank you, first of all, for taking the responsibility of chairing the governance committee. I've not said this in the past. I know we've had several meetings, but you think carefully about these matters, and I am very grateful because it's great support, not just for the board members, but for the staff as well. That kind of leadership gives staff a sense of where we're going, where we need to be, what you think is important, what we all think is important. And I say the same thing to the other 2 committee members. Thank you all very much for your service.
I appreciate that, Chairman Carney, and I certainly also appreciate Member Shaw and Member Fernandez-Catcham for their efforts on this score, as well as those of the staff. Do either Joe or Omar sort of want to give an overview of the self-evaluation process? I described it a bit and referenced that the state authorities law requires that we conduct a self-evaluation, and that's done on an anonymous basis, and the results are aggregated and made available to the public. But I did want to give other folks the opportunity to share any thoughts about that process.
Thank you, Jonathan. This is Executive Director Joe Murin. I'm going to defer on commenting on it because I think Omar has handled this in working with yourself as well as the other board members. So I'll let him, give the overview and the commentary on that, and then, allow you and the other board, the committee members to go through the discussion, that follows from there. So Omar, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so I would repeat something John said just to emphasize it. We give as we're required to, members the opportunity to kind of think about the effectiveness of the board and how the board conducts its business and how the members, the appointed members, interact with the staff using this structured kind of format. The use of the sheet and the kind of responses they send back genuinely are anonymized. It goes back not even to an officer of the board or one of the staff you see in these meetings. It goes to one of our accounting personnel who opens them and tabulates them and puts them in a spreadsheet. So we don't even see the handwriting or like the ink marks on the form. It truly is anonymous. It's a useful sheet in the sense that it covers quite a range of topics, ranging from kind of fairly technical questions about how the board thinks about statutory authority to questions about the board really conducting the work it needs to, getting things done, and to kind of more subjective questions about the members' viewpoint on how the members as a collective and individually exercise their governance and exercise their judgment and kind of carry out the authorities of the board. So it's a useful document where it's prescribed in state law. Of course, we follow almost identically the format the State Authorities Budget Office asks us to use, the same format year to year, which helps us we lay out the results for several years. We can see kind of trend lines and the answers or kind of things that pop out from year to year in terms of variances. So it's a good process. It's a tight process. It's an anonymous process, and it's standardized both here with the board as well as kind of statewide across all the authorities.
Thank you, Omar. I do have one question about that, and it relates to a point that the esteemed real chair mentioned to me, which is my understanding is that the process is standardized, but that there may be some opportunity under the governing law regulation for customization of the criteria that are listed, the questions essentially that are listed. I don't think that's something that we've done in the past, but is your understanding that that's something that is available as an option for us to think about?
Yes, my understanding is, provided you cover the range of topics prescribed by the state ABO, they won't penalize you or kind of disallow the form responses if you add additional questions, whether you tack them on as additional lines to the form itself or you just staple a second form in kind of a similar format with the board-specific or kind of topic-specific questions. I think either approach would be allowable. The key thing is the state ABO wants you to cover the range of prescribed topics, and then if you want to inquire beyond that, that would be permissible.
I see. So the criteria that are on there are fixed, but there is an ability to supplement them.
Correct. If you were to make minor changes to the wording of the prescribed form in the name of clarity or in the name of tailoring the form to the specific facts and circumstances of the board, I doubt the state ABO would look askance at that. I think their focus is they want to see you're covering the full suite of topics they prescribed in their format. If you do it with slightly different verbiage, I doubt they're going to care much. If you want to go over and beyond that and inquire about other topics that may be specific given the unique mission or the unique financial profile of a particular board, I doubt they would. They would probably encourage that, honestly. I think they're just trying to make sure you kind of cover all the key topics. But their focus is they want to get the key topics in their mind covered, and they want to be able to compare board to board statewide. And if you do other things, whether stapling a second sheet or appending additional questions at the bottom, they're unlikely to to complain about that.
Understood. And Chair Carney, did you have thoughts on this that you wanted to share with us?
I do, and thank you, Chairman Golden. It's my own view, and I've actually, in another part of my life, had to work with the ABO to refashion questions like this. Some of these questions are particularly applicable to what the Water Board does. others are not, in my humble view. What I would like to do is to ask staff to look at the questions and to help us to reword them, to refashion them, to reform them as may be necessary to better reflect what the Water Board does. Our first question, board members have a shared understanding of the mission and purpose of the Water Board. We are a rate-setting authority. That's what we do. There are board members who are apparently not as clear on that as we would like for them to be. The question can be stated in a more precise way, and we should probably give that some thought. And we have public people, we have the members of the public on the call. It's important that these good people understand that we are trying to do as best we can what we've been charged to do. Another question, the board members set clear and measurable performance goals for the Water Board that contribute to the accomplishment of its mission. Well, if its mission is to set the rates fairly and equitably, do we have measurable performance goals for setting the rates? Are we doing a good job? Are we accurately reviewing the recommendations that may be made by the Department of Environmental Protection? Are we doing what we need to do to get that right? Another question, board members are knowledgeable about the Water Board's programs, financial statements, reporting requirements, and other transactions. Well, is that really applicable to what we do? Do the Water Board members go, there is a committee, a joint committee, of course, a joint audit committee. We review the financial statements that are submitted by both the Water Finance Authority and by the Water Board, and Omar works with us to get that done. Is that a fair question for the members of the Water Board who are not on that committee, who do not review that document? I think what we need is to have, and Chairman Golden, I may be way out on my skis, way out over my skis on this one, but I think we need to consider carefully what the questions, how the questions relate to what our members do, and where there are revisions necessary. And I'd ask staff to take a look at that. It would be great to get those recommendations. The end.
Well, I certainly don't think you're over any skis at all, and as usual, your comments are insightful and helpful. I will ask a follow-up question for the staff to consider along with what you just said, which is if the notion is that these criteria are required even if they don't have a perfect fit with what we do, is there an ability to put a column that says not applicable or something along those lines? So if folks think it's just not relevant to what we do, they can so indicate rather than having to pick agree or disagree with a statement that they don't think is pertinent. So maybe if Omar, Joe, or you could address Chair Carney's comments and also my question about whether it's possible to add another column or if that's not consistent with what the state is looking for.
So I would suggest that we give staff a chance to think it all through carefully. And I think you, of course, should be involved directly in whatever recommendations staff may choose to make. If a column is necessary or a column is deemed appropriate, let's do it. But if not, then let's reform the questions so that they more accurately reflect our need to have answers from the governance people on this board. I don't want to get too far in front of the process, but if Joe and Omar and Al can think that through carefully, it'd be great to know where they come out on it. Al Rodriguez, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair Carney, because I was not clear. I did not mean to put any of the staff members on the spot in terms of giving us a finite answer on
Sure. I know.
language
I got
or adding columns. I wondered if they had any preliminary thoughts based on what we've said thus far that they think are worth sharing with the committee at this point, or if the issue is one that the staff wants to take under advisement and we can confer about at a subsequent meeting. And specifically, I don't know off the top of my head if those wording changes are really how credible and practical they are, and maybe the staff just has an immediate reaction to that.
Right, and
your
so,
committee member Fernandez Ketchum is on. Ellen, do you have? It's Al. You may not have any thoughts on this at all at the moment, but if you do, I'd love to hear what they are.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I actually do. I think that it'll be worth revisiting the criteria for language. I mean, it looks like we all managed to answer. we managed to agree and somewhat agree for most of the criteria, so they seem like they are applicable. We found our own ways of answering, right? But that might be worth exploring further to get more exact with the language. I love the idea, though, of the non-applicable, but of course, there's always danger in the non-applicable that somebody may lean towards just answering non-applicable, which is why then I would make the case for working on the language for each of the criteria.
Yeah, that's a great point, Member Fernandez Ketchum. Thank you so much for that perspective. The only reason I thought that non-applicable might be an appropriate column is because there is no mechanism by which it is tracked as to whether people return them at all. And in fact, as we see, we have 4 responses, which are not responses from the full board. And I wonder if there are folks who feel like maybe because they don't think some of the items are applicable, they don't really know how to answer. So I agree with you. There is some danger in having that column, but I wonder if it may be something that, given the essentially enforceably compulsory nature of this exercise, may be warranted in any event. But those are very, very thoughtful comments. I don't know, Member Shaw, did you have any other thoughts on this that you wanted to share?
I mean, I think that a lot of what, I think it not being a good apple, to other people's points, I don't think it's a good survey based on what we do. I think a lot of the stuff don't really apply. But to your point about people not turning it in, I didn't turn it in because it's on the counter. I forgot to mail it. It's COVID.
You're not forgiven. You're not forgiven.
So I did not turn it in. To answer your point about people didn't turn it in because it was not applicable, no. It was, you have to go to a mailbox, and God help you to find a mailbox in South Brooklyn.
Member Shaw, I appreciate your practicality and your frankness. I didn't mean to make anybody feel.
No. I'm literally, you were wondering as to why people didn't fill it in. I'm just being honest. That's very. On the counter. When I saw the meeting, ironically, I saw it on the counter this morning. I was like, "Oh shit! I never put this in the mail."
And to that end, another question that I would ask is there an alternative that the state provides? And the answer may very well be no. But is there an alternative that the state provides whereby this can be done anonymously, albeit electronically? Because I think that we get 100% compliance if folks could just log on. The fact that folks have to print it out and fill it out or get it in the mail and then put it in an envelope and address it. Folks don't tend to spend a lot of time in hard copy correspondence these days. So that's another point that's implicit, I think, in the comment that you made. That's very helpful. And so where I will just leave it before giving the members of the staff Al or Joe or Omar who may want to say something, or I'll just leave it as, I don't think that any of us expect any specific proposals or judgments now, because we are essentially putting you guys on the spot and certainly don't mean to do that. But what I do think would be helpful is maybe in contemplation and in preparation for our next meeting, if you guys are able to look into a couple of these questions, one being, is an NA, not applicable column, appropriate? Is changing the wording other than in the most ministerial way acceptable? And is there an electronic means of doing this? And are there other questions that the staff thinks, or the members think for that matter, really should be in here for what we do that are missing? And I think that insofar as you all are able to take some time, spend some time with it, think about that, and obviously I'd like to confer with you about it before the next meeting, and share your thoughts as to what amendments, if any, we ought to make to the process and the form. I'd be grateful.
John, it's Al. My sort of go-to position is we need to be sure that we are providing the public with evaluations of our own performance that are applicable to our performance. To say that means that maybe I mean, it's my first thought on this, John, and you are the chairman, you will make a decision. My first thought on that is that there should be no questions on this evaluation that are not applicable to who we are. That's my first thought. I may be absolutely flat out wrong about that, but I need to think about it a bit more. And if you'll give me a chance to do that, I will think about it and share my thoughts with you. I think
and Chair Carney, I apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to say the not applicable column was not necessarily the first or best choice.
Sure. No, I got it.
I raised it as an alternative in the event we're not really permitted to strike some of these.
Well, but let's assume for the moment that we can. You may be right, maybe we cannot, in which event there will be questions that are not applicable. My sense from speaking with the ABO people is they want for us to give them an evaluation of our performance based on what this authority does. And we can do that. We have 4 meetings, 5 meetings a year. We can provide them with what they want, and I'm comfortable that you know we're now at a full slate of members. Dan isn't on the phone, but we have the ability to refashion these questions in a way that opens up this authority to public review of what we think we're doing, and I'm comfortable with that we can do that. So you know, I hope I sent my self-evaluation form in. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I did after listening to Arlene, but I think I did. but
electronic is important. We didn't realize we've always done these via when we sit at the end of the meetings.
Well, that's right. We sit and we check off things. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's some things to the extent the world has been modernized inside of this remote space, because I just don't. And to that point, I think that I get that the meetings need to be public, but I do think we get better board member attendance now that we've been virtual. And you know, I think that we should really sort of think about how to sort of modernize this process.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chairman, here's where I come out. I think that staff ought to be charged with the responsibility of refashioning the questions to make sure that and there may be topics that are not reflected on this survey that are matters with which we deal on a you know, a yearly basis. that should be in this survey, things that the ABO doesn't know we do. Let's give staff an opportunity, and not a. I mean, this is a year-long project. You and staff can certainly work together to fashion questions for this board that hopefully would make the NA column not necessary. Maybe it is necessary. I absolutely agree that it may be necessary, but let's see what we can come up with. Omar and Joe are, you all have extraordinarily intellectual folk. Work on it, if you will.
And
Well,
you did, Mr. Chair, okay, go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say, I appreciate your thoughtfulness, Chair Carney, and I would say the one piece I would add to that is I think it's a bit of a two-step. I think the first step in which Al Rodriguez needs to be intimately involved is what are we permitted to do? How much flexibility is afforded to a particular board under the law and regulations, and then from there, working with the other members of the staff to determine what amendments, if any, should be made to the existing questions, the wording, the form, if whether it's additional columns or and whether there ought to be other questions that are tailored to the work of the board that aren't really captured in this. And I do agree, this is not a project that lends itself to immediate resolution. It's something that really requires some reflection. And so certainly, I don't think any of us intend to put staff on the spot here because there are a bunch of moving parts here, but I think there are really some very insightful comments, and I appreciate everybody's input.
This is Evelyn, if I may. I just
Please.
wanted to add that maybe what's helpful, for example, when you look at it and start to break it down, right? Like any somewhat agree or somewhat disagree, like those are probably the ones that we should focus on to figure out, well, why did more than one board member somewhat agree? So that means that there's an area there that is not explicit. I think, and I know if I answered a somewhat agree, it's maybe because we need to connect it more to Chair's point that we need to connect it more to what we actually do. So maybe giving us more concrete, because I get this is an instrument that looks like it's a general instrument. So maybe we need to modify it so that we have examples. Well, what does it mean, for the water board, the policies, practices, and decisions of the board to maybe help us all better understand and contextualize it for what, it's applicable to the board, to the actual role that we do.
Very, very helpful. And I think it is worth noting actually that there are a number of questions where all the respondents gave the same answer, which suggests that there is some consistency of the understanding. And in all but two instances, all of the respondents were within one of two categories, which also I think the concentration, relative concentration of the responses, I think reflects some consistency. There are obviously two areas where we had three different responses that were offered, and maybe we should think a bit more about those. Not that the distribution of the responses is conclusive, but it certainly is worth thinking about those questions in particular.
Sure.
Correct. Thank you.
John, thank you. It's been it's been a good discussion. I don't know that staff is clear on what it is that we're looking for them to do, but I would hope that you and staff would get together and flesh out more of what staff might do. This is not an urgent matter. It is something we can do over time, and we will. But we should be prepared to talk about, in my view, Mr. Chairman, what the recommendations may be, not at the next meeting, but at the meeting that precedes the distribution of the survey, such that the board is comfortable that you all have done your job, and now we've got to actually think carefully about what the answers are, what our respective answers are.
That is helpful, and I will certainly follow up with staff. And I think the broad strokes are relatively clear insofar as we need to know, how much flexibility we have in terms of what sort of amendments are permissible, and then what kinds of amendments might be ones that the staff thinks are worth recommending within the guardrails of what we're allowed to do. But obviously the challenges and the details there, and that's something that will be a longer term process. I don't know if any of the staff members want to give a comment on this at this point. As I said, I certainly don't expect any definitive answers or specifics, but I certainly want to give you the opportunity if there's anything you wanted to mention in light of the exchange that we've been having.
So this is Joe Murin again. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Evelyn and Arlene and Chairman Carney. I think, this was a very robust discussion. Omar and I both have been taking notes as you've been talking, and I will also go back and we'll look at the transcript. And thank you for saying, don't put us on the spot right now, because there's a lot to take in here. And I think as you laid out, Committee Chair Golden, we can go back and work with you and the other two members, Arlene and Evelyn, to make sure that we're covering all these points and we're doing this in a timely fashion so that we can have the questionnaire revised within the context of what we're allowed to permissible, add things that we need to, and also make sure that we're covering, to Evelyn's point, I think the specificity of what are we getting to with some of the questions. So that's, I think, is going to be, take a little while for us in terms of like over the course of, I'd say, the next couple months, we could probably put that together. I think usually we do, the governance committee is like, does this at the end of the year. So we've got more than enough time before we would, have the questionnaire back out and then get the results back to be able to incorporate all this in. And also, I don't want to speak for, Secretary Rodriguez in terms of the degree that he may have to look at, or legal may have to look at in terms of what we can or can't do, or how we can modify within the, confines of the law.
Mhm.
Thank you, Joe. It's Al.
Thank you.
Al Rodriguez. I've had some experience with this, and as I said earlier, in another part of my life. You and I should spend with Chairman Golden, 15, 20 minutes on the telephone just talking about it. The question is an interesting one. Do we provide them with something that we want for them to accept, or do we go to them and ask them what they will accept from us? My own view is that we become, it's a word that doesn't exist, I think, proactive, that we go to them, we figure it out and take it to them. But you and I should spend some time talking about that with Chairman Golden.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
The one thing I would say is that this form, which is used, I would say, almost universally by local and state authorities, and I've never had the experience of this form being amended in any kind of way, but it is characterized by the ABO itself as a model. And that leads me to believe that there is some flexibility to do things with this form.
Al, it's Al Carney again. I have, in another part of my life, I have made major revisions in this questionnaire. I mean, people don't do it because they believe that they're not permitted to do it. Nobody wants to ask the ABO. But the fact is that if the questions are not, and I'll use Joe Murin's word, if specificity for our authority is not clear in the questions, let's fix it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that a short discussion with the ABO will probably clear this up right away.
Well, I would go the other way. I would internally make some decisions about this and then give the ABO that draft, if you will, and see where they go with it. But this is
Okay.
we should probably
That's
get.
what we do.
This is not a public record discussion. Actually, it's something we should.
No,
deal
I
with
think that's one way. That's definitely one way to approach it.
Okay, cool.
And I think this is all worth spending some time reflecting on and conferring about and figuring out the best way to proceed. But thank you, Chair Carney, for your leadership on this and your thoughtfulness about it, and with respect to everything else we do, for that matter.
Are you kind? Thank you, sir.
Of course, I'm mindful that that we do have another agenda item, and I want to make sure that we conclude in time for the general board meeting. But is there anything else that the staff wanted to add on this before we move on?
No, Jonathan, I think you covered it very comprehensively, and we'll take all this back, and like we said, we'll circle back with you and have further discussion as to next steps.
Thank you very much. So the fourth agenda item that we have is relating to the board's chief contracting officer, and I wonder whether either Joe or Omar, you'd be willing to just for the benefit of the members of the board, give them a refresher, and for the members of the public who may not be familiar with it, give a sense as to what this role is and what we're being asked to consider.
Yeah, so John, this is Omar. I'll take this. We added this to the agenda because it's an important kind of named official role. It's not an officer role per se, although it is usually an officer who holds a role. Currently, the chief contracting officer is myself, but by convention and tradition, it has been the treasurer who holds the role. Mathilde had it before me, and we followed that convention after she left, and I took up the chief contracting officer duties myself. It's an appointment made by the executive director under the ED's kind of administrative and oversight authority. But it's quite an important range of duties that fall under it. The two big categories are the board's procurement authority. The chief contracting officer oversees, designs, and structures all the RFPs we do. It oversees the negotiation and specification of the contract terms. If there are changes we want to make to our standard RFP process, if there are changes we take to our model contracts, kind of the economic structure of how the contract provisions are negotiated, and kind of that being that point person who handles vendor relations and negotiations, are all things that the chief contracting officer is tasked with to carry out side by side with in-house counsel as well as legal partners of the law department, Al's group and others. That's probably the biggest bucket in terms of what the chief contracting officer is doing under their auspices of being the CCO. The other category of things the chief contracting officer does relate to the board's property, which is really the property it has leaseholds on, as well as a small amount of property we have in the office. These are personal properties, as referred to in the board's governing documents. And the chief contracting officer is responsible for maintaining the logs and records that deal with any property to which we've released the leasehold to transfer to a partner agency or to an outside party, as well as to make records and kind of justification analysis for any new property we happen to lease or purchase, which is an infrequent event, but it does happen sometimes. We have some small capital equipment in the office that we technically lease, for example. So it's an important behind-the-scenes role, and whenever the board is kind of presented with a procurement action to consider, or a model contract, or kind of the documents and analysis behind a real property action, it's really coming out of the chief contracting officer's area and the team they work with on both at DEP as well as among the board's professional staff. And unless you immerse yourself in the kind of board documents and bylaws and our provisions, it's not a term you've heard before. So we want to just kind of make the board aware of it, kind of identify who it is, So as you go through the governance committee documents, you know who you're referring to when you see chief contracting officer. It's the treasurer. So that's really an informational point. Certainly, there are questions or kind of comments about what scope of updating, or kind of questions about how we do the RFPs, or questions about how behind the scenes we analyze the real property actions. Any of that would be questions you would direct to me, either in this forum or offline.
Thank you, Omar. I'll just kick it off really quickly, and these are really observations that don't require an immediate response. Again, not necessarily on the spot, but just something to reflect on. If the suggestions are impractical for any reason, it would be good to know. The first that I have is from reading through the document that's titled Policy on the Procurement of Goods and Services. I see that the contracting officer is permitted to enter into a contract without board approval for an amount that is between $25,000 and $100,000, and that then needs to report that to the board. And if it's under $25,000, it doesn't require board approval, nor does it necessarily need to be reported to the board. And I understand the need for that sort of de minimis exception, but what I wanted to ask about is in the subsequent section that talks about no bid contract. It permits the contracting officer to enter into no bid contracts subject to the provisions of that section 5, which do not, or Roman numeral 2, section 5, I should say, that do not require necessarily even advising the board of the entry into a contract under $25,000. And if it's something that's reasonable and practicable, my view would be that the staff should please consider and let us know whether it would work, or whether there's a reason it can't work, such that if there's a no bid contract, even under $25,000, that the board should be notified about it. I understand it doesn't necessarily need to be approved by the board, and it would gum up the works if it did. But it seems to me that just informing the board about all no bid contracts that are in any way material, even at a smaller level, makes sense. That's one observation I had, and then the other observation I had isn't really related to the materials as much as just sort of generally about the real property aspect of it, which is that I understand that the contracting officer has to approve of leases, and takes an important part in the disposition of real property. And I don't know that this is a language issue for the policy, but I would certainly want us to be in a position where we would expect that the board would be advised early in the process as practicable when the disposition of property is being discussed, rather than when agreements are fully hammered out and they're brought to us for a thumbs up, thumbs down. I think in some instances it would be very useful for the board to have a sense as to what's being considered and how it's being considered and how it's being approached in advance. Are there other thoughts or comments from other board members or reactions from staff? As I said, my observations were really just ones for you to take under advisement, and let us know. I mean, if you want to or can respond to them on the spot, you can, but I don't mean to put you there.
John, I think it's a terrific suggestion. Even if what your committee gets or what the board gets is a list of those transactions that were the least exciting transactions, even if that's what we get, It's the contracting party, the non-bid transactions. It'd be great to know who got those. The public should be given the opportunity to know that. In my own view, it's a staff question to be answered by staff. But I like the idea very much. I'll shut up now because I'm not on the committee.
So, Member Golden, would you mind repeating that for my notes? What you're proposing?
Sure. In sum and substance, what I'm suggesting, there were two parts. The first was that, and I may be misreading it because there's cross-reference to a number of sections, but as I read it currently, the contracting officer can enter into a no-bid contract that is under $25,000 without reporting it to the board. And all I would ask is that if there is a no-bid contract that's under $25,000, that like the contracts between $25,000 and $100,000 be reported to the board at the next meeting. Specifically for no-bid contracts.
Yeah, I guess what I was reading was in section 2.2 is that anything over 10,000 has to be bid out.
Well, there is a section 6 creates a waiver circumstance. Yeah. There can be no bid contracts, and it allows for no bid contracts in circumstances where a person or firm has superior qualifications or there's specialized knowledge required, etc. And so, so my point is just that if somebody is determines that exception needs to be used and is entering into a contract under that provision, I think it just makes sense for the board to be informed, even if the amount is under $25,000.
Okay, so for contracts that are between 10,000 and 25,000, that the procurement officer deems a waiver is appropriate, the board should be notified of that.
Well, yeah, the amendment that I would specifically contemplate is that under section 6, the paragraph that references that even if the contracting officer determines that a contract should be awarded on a non-competitive basis, that the contracting officer still has to comply with 2.5, that should just say if it's on a non-competitive basis, the contracting officer has to comply with 2.5, except all such contracts need to be reported to the board.
Okay, so you're suggesting we amend the policy to provide for that?
Yes. Yes, and if there are problems with that, practical problems or otherwise, certainly let me know. And if other board members have thoughts on it, I'm happy to entertain them. To me, if we're going to have if we had a series of $20,000 no bid contracts, none of which had to be reported to the board, that would be something that would be of concern to me.
Yes. So you would want that notice prior to that contract being consummated?
No, it can be after the contract. It's
right.
Consistent with section 5, Romanet 2, which says if it's between 25 and 100, the board just needs to be notified at the next meeting.
Okay.
So what I would just say, if it's no bid, we don't have the $25,000 floor. If it's no bid, it's just under 100.
Okay.
And then the other observation I made was just about trying to keep us in the loop on the real property determinations as early as practicable. Because sometimes I think folks have felt like we find out about those later than they would like to, ideally.
Well, what I would suggest at this point, if you will allow me, is that the committee accept your recommendation formally and then present it to the board, and the board can accept it.
Do you think a board acceptance is necessary here, Al? And I think that
Yeah,
the committee
it
can
is
actually vote it up, and that's the end of it. It's a governance committee matter.
Yeah, but it is the policy is the policy of the board. It's
And the
not
board,
policy
the board
of the
approved the policy that we currently have. It's a board approved policy.
Yes, it's
So,
yeah.
so maybe
so
just to make it simpler,
I would
if it
the
be
board-
amended, the next
policy is
board
the
meeting.
policy of the board and not the committee.
Okay.
Okay,
Then the board
That-
has
so
to.
maybe if
that's
you-
fine.
approved by the
if-
board. So any amendment of that policy should also be approved by the board, I would say.
I agree. I
That's
agree.
my-
If it's a board approved policy, then it's fine. I thought that it was.
So
a
if we
committee
could,
policy.
what I was just going to ask is if we could prepare a draft, it should be a very simple amendment for consideration by the whole board, not at the board meeting that started a minute ago, but perhaps for the next one.
Yeah,
That's
most
probably the way-
definitely. Most
Um,
definitely. And that amendment would be distributed to the board for their review prior to the meeting, I think.
Terrific.
That's fine. That's great. Thank you. Is there anything else that we need to cover? Again, mindful of the time, thank you very much to the members and the staff and members of the public who've joined. But before we close out, is there anything else that any of the members or staff want to make sure we touch on?
Good meeting, Chairman Golden. Thank you very much.
And no, and this is Joe Murin, but no, I think, Jonathan, you covered most everything, so, you know, I defer to now you and the secretary, adjourn.
All right. So I guess, do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
You-
I guess.
Member Fernandez
we need
Ketchum,
that
Member
either
Shaw,
from
one of
Evelyn
you.
Either from Evelyn or from Member
yes,
Shaw.
Yes, motion to end.
And
Second. Arlene
Perfect.
Shaw,
Okay,
second.
very good.
and I'm in favor as well, so it's unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
I need
See-
2 minutes before the next meeting, everybody. I'll call you
All
back.
right. Talk to you
Conference
shortly.
recording stopped.
Bye-bye.